January the 8th, 2019. Clerk, please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Stevens. Stevens is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Tuma?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schron? Here. Ms. Conwell?
Present.
Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown? Present. Council President Brady?
Present.
You have a quorum.
All right. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. President. Two speakers. The first is Christina Keegan.
Welcome. Sounds familiar.
Hi, thank you. My name is Christina Keegan. It's my first time at a council meeting, so thank you for having me. I would like to make a public comment about Ordinance 2019-0001, the Cuyahoga County Housing Program, addressing the reorganization of the county land bank. Many residents that I work with in my community in Detroit Shoreway only recently heard of this legislation, and my main point today is that this is a very legislation that could have very serious impacts on our communities, directly affecting the disposition of vacant land and vacant housing, and the way in which our communities revitalize. And people I have spoken to are incredibly interested in having a robust public discussion about this legislation, and are vehemently against this passing through just committee and the legislative process without having a discussion around this. The primary concern that I've heard so far is that the legislation does not address affordability, and that in making the aim of the land bank, a primary mission of the land bank to raise housing prices, we're missing an opportunity to directly impact and help folks that have been harmed worse by the foreclosure crisis. That we have a dire need for affordable housing in our communities, not just in Cleveland, but in the inner ring suburbs as well, and that people are being priced out. So this commitment, financial commitment that the county is prepared to make could be an incredible opportunity for investing in more equitable development that revitalizes our community without displacement. And so I would ask that the county council consider slowing down the process and developing a community input and community engagement process, either led by the county or led by the county land bank, so that community members have the opportunity to define their goals and utilize this funding opportunity to meet those goals determined by the community members themselves, rather than, I think, a blanket approach that advocates simply raising housing prices. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Liu?
Good afternoon. We just heard somebody talking about housing, affordable housing, but those can only be reachable for the people who currently are not in the very bad situations. This doesn't have to be only county jails, homeless shelters, even actually in drug treatment centers and all other related field. Because right now our society has been successfully producing people who can only move themselves around homeless shelter, county jail, streets, abandoned buildings, treatment centers, group home, and such places. They have no way to get a job opportunity. They have no way to get housing at all. Don't even say that's affordable or not. Now, searches has been on. The other day, that was actually end of December, when I went into that place. Guess what? The security officer did not believe that there's nothing special hiding under this particular shirt. I was told to lift the shirt up. Well, so I responded honestly. I asked, should I have to strip right here in the lobby? Because it's only extra fat he could see, so I was going to make some music, to go along with it. Now, however, the same thing from this same Safe Choice, this particular company, there's another female officers she didn't like she was challenged by one of the people staying there say, what are you searching for? So next time when she saw this same person, she actually ignored this person on purpose, make this person wait. So by the time this person thought I would not be searched and moved to the door, she had to get that person back. So then she accused this person throwing jacket at her for search, totally disrespectful, this and that. Good staff could not do anything about it. They could get a dinner from inside to give this person, and she yelled at this person, staff cannot search you. I'm the one doing that. You get out. So this person had to be outside in the cold to eat dinner. Well, for this kind of situation, I guess when the new year is here, and today I went to Adamsport, that particular company, right now it was there to do their jobs. However, it seems like other people got treated fairly. Only the people in certain kind of places will still be ignored, discriminated, and abused. This year, I hope we will do something about it. Thank you.
That's it.
All righty.
Mr. President, please let the record reflect that Ms. Stevens and Mr. Jones are now in attendance.
Okay. All right. Well, next we have a discussion with, is Diane Beckett here? Diane Beckett, Executive Director of the Solid Waste District, and Majid Makhlouf, our old law director. Not that old, but, you know, a while back. To the district to address this issue.
Thank you very much, Council President and members of Council, for having us here. And that it is like a very happy reunion. And it's obviously I'm the former law director, but I'm not in here in any capacity as law director, nor am I acting as the county's legal counsel. So I have been retained to act as the Solid Waste District's legal counsel in its purchase of this property. And that's why we're here to explain to you what we're seeking from the county council. The district had gone through a process to determine the property that it has, where it has its corporate offices right now in Garfield Heights on 131st Street. What is the most economic use of that property, the long-term objectives for the district, what makes sense? And they've retained Allegro Real Property to do an analysis and concluded that it made much economic sense for the district to actually purchase the property instead of remaining as a tenant on that property. And they did the math and concluded that that was the approach to do. Allegro then proceeded with trying to negotiate a letter of intent for the purchase of that property, and was able to secure, to negotiate the letter of intent and get it signed on behalf of both parties. After which point I was retained to do the purchase and sale agreement between the district and the seller of the property, or the owner of the property. The property is part of a complex. I don't know if you know Garfield Heights. That's where the State Bureau of Workers' Compensation is located. So under the purchase and sale agreement, there is a process that has to happen where there would be a parcel split and consolidation to create the actual district, to create the actual parcel that is being purchased by the district, and that process is going through right now, and it's being through the surveys are being done, all the due diligence is being done, the property inspection, the roof inspection, everything is going through that process. As some of you may know, and I think just a little bit of history about the solid waste district in terms of the structure between the solid waste district and the county. The solid waste district exists under the revised code in Cuyahoga County. I think it's existed at least since 1993 or 1994. Diane will correct me. And the revised code has the structure where it creates the board of directors of the district, who also happen to be the board of commissioners. So the board of commissioners serve as the board of directors of the district. But they serve in different capacities. They're not sort of the board of commissioners when they're serving also as the board of directors of the district, and pretty much happens in all statutory counties. And the way it used to happen in Cuyahoga County historically is the board of commissioners would adjourn their meeting as the Board of Commissioners, and then now wearing a different hat as the Board of Directors of the Solid Waste District would do the district's work, and the district has its own bylaws in its place. After the county charter came in place, the charter allocated, when you appoint somebody to a board, it allocated, but it didn't have a structure where the commissioners themselves served as the board of that district, and we were dealing with that issue back then. And there was an ordinance that this council adopted, an ordinance creating, making sure the assigning in place of the county commissioners that the Solid Waste District Board consists of the 3 members, one being the county executive, one being a member of council appointed by the council president. Currently, Councilwoman Sunny Simon sits in that capacity, and the third person being the Director of Public Works. And the district's board has been vetting this purchase throughout this process, the wisdom of it, and has been very comfortable with the process so far and has voted to approve it. I should say also that in connection with this purchase, the district sought a loan from the Ohio Water Development Authority. The purchase price is $1.7 million. Sought a loan for $1.2 million and was approved. And that's a loan to the district, not a loan to the county. So the county is not assuming liability in that transaction. An issue came up at the very last minute when we're trying to get the approval. The law department was looking through things and made a distinction that because it's the ownership of property or the purchase of property as opposed to other contracting processes, because when the council adopted the ordinance creating the board of the district, it wanted to make sure that it doesn't interfere with what's always been happening in terms of the district doing its own contracting. So there is a provision in the county code that says that here are the new district members, but the district shall continue approving its own contracts through its own board. That we're not trying to interfere with that. It didn't mention property; it just said contracting processes. So the question arose whether that extended to the ownership of property, and the revised code, quite frankly, is not an example of clarity when it comes to these things, because of much of it is when it speaks of the board, which board it's speaking of, and sometimes when it talks about ownership of property, it refers to the Board of Commissioners as owning the property for the district, and other places, the district itself owning the property. So at that point, when that issue came up, we thought that the safest thing to do was to come to the county council to seek the council's approval of the purchase and clarify that this is happening through the district. To avoid any issues with title insurance, any issues with any of the loan transactions, to be able to give clean legal opinions and not have any issues that it's been, signed off by both the board of the district itself and the county council as well. And that's why we're here, and we're happy to answer any questions. That was a convoluted explanation.
Thank you. It just brought back a lot of memories. I'm starting to remember the first 4 years a lot better listening to your presentation. You did do a great job.
Thank you very much.
I know you guys were knocking on our door pretty hard last month about this, and Councilwoman Simon was one of your advocates. I'm sorry she doesn't happen to be here right now. Are there questions by the committee? Hearing none. Any comments? We'll be dealing with this later this evening.
Just thank you very much, and I would emphasize, I know we're asking the council to pass it on first reading because we have the closing happening the 31st. And
Well,
we
tell us at least a little bit about the timeline there, because
Sure.
I know you were worried last month.
We ran into the Christmas holiday and the New Year with the schedule. The property right now, under the purchase and sale agreement, the closing is targeted to happen by January 31st, by the end of this month. There is a process from when we have the council approval, because we're trying to finish the documents with the Ohio Water Development Authority, and that does take some time, and they need the resolution to be able to approve, to finish the closing on the transaction. So it is a pretty tight timeline, with today being the 8th, and when we need to have everything done for the closing to happen in place, which makes it urgent to have the passage on first reading.
Ms. Beckett, do you have anything to? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman.
This property is in Garfield?
Correct.
Who is the current owner who is selling the property to?
The current title owner is Pioneer Building 2, but it's part of the Dallett Group. the Dalit group, the Neil Vinny, the Vinny family.
Okay. Was there any weigh-in from the mayor of Garfield?
No, because it's a sort of a private transaction on the purchase of property, but obviously the city will be weighing in on the parcel split, and that's going through its process with the survey to do the parcel split on consolidation. But honestly, it's, from the city's perspective, it's providing a secure occupant of that property, especially with what's happening with the state, potentially the state property. What happens with that lease, I can't speak to it, I'm not party
But
to
you have
that,
no
but
reason to believe there's any opposition from
No.
Garfield City Hall?
not that I know of.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, do you have any, Councilman Miller?
Where do the funds come from to repay the loan on the purchase?
The waste district is self-funded through what we call a generation fee, which is essentially a tax on waste generated in Cuyahoga County that goes to a landfill. So that generates about $2 million a year in revenue for the district, and we'll be paying off the loan with those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Any final comments?
No, just that we're in year 9 of a 10-year lease, so we've been at this location under a lease arrangement for the past 9 years. The property itself was built out for us back in 2010. So this makes sense for our long-term budget to be able to save on our space costs long-term. And this resolution, I think, will just help clarify, the authority to hold title in the name of the district. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. That'll be in front of us this evening. And the next discussion is, we're going to have Michael Dever up to talk about the award to the project management consultants for owners representation services in connection with the Justice Center Complex project. This has been in front of us this was first in front of us almost a year ago.
Yes. Good afternoon, council members. Michael Dever with the Department of Public Works. Thank you for bringing this issue before the Committee of the Whole today. As many of you know, I have a short presentation here to kind of go over this item, but this item was before this group back in actually a year ago, almost to the day. Is when it was first introduced to city or county council. And then it ultimately went to the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee for discussion, and I think many of the members are here with us today. And then it went, after that, then it came back for a second reading suspension, or second reading, and then the item, I believe, was then put on hold as further discussion took place in regards to how we were proceeding. So at first, what I'd like to do is, for those members that were not at that committee meeting back in January of 2018, I guess I'm going to give a little bit of history of what took place to bring us to that point, and then maybe provide some clarification of where we are today, and then hopefully we'll be able to move forward. So back in 2013 through and 14, the county initiated a facility condition assessment of the Justice Center. This council ended up appropriating money for that effort. And what ended up happening is we did a complete assessment of the Justice Center at that time to look at the condition of it and what kind of repairs were needed, what kind of things needed to be done to it. It was a pretty lengthy discussion that took place. I think the monies were actually appropriated. This council approved the contract to move forward with Osborne Engineering back in late 2012. So it took through 13 and 14 for actually a report to be completed of showing the assessment of the Justice Center complex. And this is everything on that block itself, including the police building at the time, which was not under county ownership at that time. And I'm pleased to say now, with the help of this council, is that parcel is now part of the overall complex. But we did do, during that exercise, is an assessment of that facility. And we ended up basically getting information back that the facility or the systems within the facility itself were near the end of their useful life. We could have improved that facility, meaning brought before you a plan and proposal to improve, to fix all of the systems within the building itself, which was a significant cost. We ended up having some pricing figures put together that show that pricing ranging from anywhere from $150 million just to fix the systems. Now I'm talking about mechanical systems, elevator systems, the envelope system of the building, the roofing system, just to complete, to repair those and not to make any significant changes in the space needs within the building was close to $150 million. That was one step that we took. We looked at options also at that time for changes in the facility, and those options included 7 different opportunities. And the price range to incorporate those options, which involved trying to consolidate and get out of lease space. There were some expansion needs of the prosecutor's office and the housing court at the time also that were needed to take into account. So those various options, that price tag for those varying options ranged from $369 million to $429 million. There was a change in government at the same time. There was new leadership coming into. This item did not move forward. There was discussion of it, but obviously a huge price tag like that, probably the largest capital program or project that the county would ever undertake at the time, was in discussion. In 2016 and 17, there was a visioning process that took place under the leadership of the county executive, where we engaged with the judiciary and basically looked at these were really the first steps towards like an extensive user engagement, knowing that these are the users of this facility and that they needed to be actively engaged in the process here. Workshops were conceived to elicit open conversation on the issues, concerns, needs, and priorities of the judiciary. The discussion focused on justice trends, changes in statute and court operation practices, impacts of technology in court operations, modern security requirements, workspace efficiency, and the staff environment, and then most importantly, public access to justice also. The outcomes from those workshops included a general direction on the priorities and a development of guiding principles that would govern or should govern through the planning and design activities. Nicole just recently passed out to you a copy of those guiding principles that came out of that discussion. In 2018 and 17, late 2007, mid 2017, the county at that time then solicited requests for qualifications for an owner representative to be brought on board to lead in the planning phase of this project going forward. That's the item that is ultimately came before you last January. There was a selection process that took place, and I was going to have Nicole step up and talk specifically of how that group, owner's representative, PMC Limited, how they were selected specifically for this project. From that, and we'll get to that in 1 minute, and the outcome, so that's then, at that time then, when it came before you in committee, then the item was held. There was a request by the court and some office and stakeholders to have a more active role within the overall process, especially during the critical decision points. After lengthy discussion, we collectively, and that means the courts and the other stakeholders, developed a memorandum of understanding, which is attached to today's item, the PMC contract. It's an attachment to that document. That document identifies an executive steering committee with the purpose of advising and providing determinations concerning the project. Our owner rep, PMC, if approved by this group, shall develop a decision-making protocol and assist the county in establishing a decision-making process and authority of the Executive Steering Committee. At the same time, I want to point out that it is understood by all the parties that the determinations made by this executive committee, which is 12 individuals, and it's in your packet today, and I think it highlights the 12 offices that are going to be part of that executive steering committee, that executive committee do not replace, supersede the contractual, legislative, administrative, or appropriation authority as provided by the ORC or local charters, ordinances of the county executive, county council, city council, and/or the mayor of the city. I wanted to clearly point that out.
Just, not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but for those who might want to, the MOU is on page 309 at the back of the.
I'm sorry,
At the back of your.
I didn't provide
at the
that
back
with
of your
the
package.
packet
No,
today.
that's fine, just, you referenced it, so.
So that's basically what brings us here today. So it was a lengthy discussions, deliberations, back and forth with all of those major stakeholders. But we have a really great foundation here. And as you can see through that MOU, all the parties have signed off to it, from the administrative judge of the Common Pleas Court, county prosecutor, public defender, the mayor of the city of Cleveland, the city council president, the clerk of courts for the city and the county, and the administrative judge for the city is also on that document. So there's a total of 12 individuals that we hurriedly pulled together their signatures last week so we could have this item before you today. And so with that, if you'd like, I can go through the process of the selection of PMC. Nicole's
Let's see if we
here.
have any, yeah, I'd like that, but are there any questions before we go into the selection
Yes.
process, Councilman?
I have a question as to the scope of this process, whether the focus is going to be on the needs of the courts and your judicial function, or to what extent is it also going to include whatever we might do going forward regarding the jail?
It will include all the jail functions also, and that's very clear. What we are going to be bringing before you in the very near future, and we hope to have advertised shortly, is to bring a programmer in specifically to do a review of the courts, working with the courts, also the sheriff's office, corrections, and I know that there's other analyses going on at this time. But that programmer is about to come on board and work together with PMC and the county and these executive committee members to look at the operations within the facility, to look at best practices, look at trends going forward. So yes, they will be actively involved. It's a very, what we feel is going to be a very complete process that we hope that will be completed by towards the end of this year.
And
Go ahead, follow up.
to the director regarding the jail, I just want to encourage everybody to resist the temptation to say that the current facilities are obviously overcrowded, and so therefore we need to build more cells. If we do that, if we build more cells, we'll find people to put in them. We just have to recognize that the rates of incarceration that we have are way too high. On a worldwide perspective, the United States and Russia are essentially tied for the world lead, and everybody else is far behind. And from a local perspective, you only have to look as far as Summit County to see where they're doing way better than we are in terms of not having large numbers of prisoners detained while waiting for their trials. And which is tremendously driving up the incarceration rates. And so I just want to put that out there, that we have to think big and bold as to how we can help set up the conditions where people that don't really need to be in jail are not sent there.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Schron and then Councilwoman Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will this give us the ability to look at whether or not the location is the correct location for the jail, ultimately, as we study this project?
Yes, it will definitely be part of the process, and that's with all those key stakeholders in the room to look at the information, to analyze all of the data that comes in. Once again, I want to report back that this is all ultimately coming back before this body, okay? But this group will be all encompassing, and they will take a look at that issue also, and is that the right location? And, you know, it's going to come down to access to justice, the cost, overall cost for a facility like this. So we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do, and I'd just like to point out too, through that MOU, we've already started outlining that we have a very, very aggressive schedule that we intend to push forward, and we've let all of those committee members of that executive committee know that we need to move fairly quickly here to come up with a plan that we can ultimately present back to this body.
Just as my colleague, Councilman Miller mentioned about past practices, we'll also look at the possibility that the Justice Center is bifurcated, that the jail does not necessarily have to be in the same location as the court system?
Yes, I think that will be one of those options, again, you're going to look at, and there'll be a number of things that they're going to look at. You have to take this at a whole and look at everything that's going on in regards to the Justice Center. You know, the Cleveland Police are still within the Cleveland Police building as we speak today, and there may be an opportunity for them to participate in this also. So I think you're going to take a big look at this, and obviously the cost is going to be.
So it'll be truly a clean sheet of paper with no preconceived notion on any of this?
I think that's how you have to approach it.
I agree. I just hope it is,
Yeah.
as opposed to replicating existing practices, which means that also, at least my understanding is the courts from the Supreme Court are going to reduce the number of judges that we have here. Are we looking at it with the expectation of the reduced number, or what we currently have?
Well, I could not speak to that right now, okay? I'm thinking
have
that
to,
is,
though, don't we?
that's in the discussion.
Okay.
I would say that would be some information that would come out of it, and how we proceed from there.
I believe
I
the
don't wanna
Chief Justice has
speculate.
already announced, hasn't she, that there's going to be a reduction?
I am not aware of that. I can't speak to it, so I'll.
Okay.
Okay, Councilwoman Conwell.
Through the chair to Mr. Dever, any discussions on where inmates would be housed during if it was decided there was a new construction?
Well, the current facility, if there's a need, if we're going to build out in the current facility, we're going to need to make accommodations for build out, so there may be temporary relocation. Once again, that's going to be part of it, because there'll be a significant cost to build out a hardened facility. I believe it's close to $325 a square foot cost to build out correctional space,
Yeah.
which is significant. So all of those things have to come into play here. for
Over the 10 months,
consideration.
I'm just wondering what discussions have kind of taken place, especially if will we remain at the same site, which would mean, I'm talking if we're going new construction.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering if these conversations have been had. We'd have to tear down the old house, people other places, and then rebuild.
Right.
And what time frame and all that would.
That's true. One good thing about it, speaking on the police headquarters building, having ownership of that now, and if the police department do find another place and move out, we have some potential swing space within that facility that we currently own that we may be able to use for temporary housing of some sort, maybe the courts or something, while you do remodel. Once again, nothing is decided as of today. I mean, this group is going in as Councilman Sharon said, it's going to be a blank sheet of paper, and let's come up with the best plan possible. I think there's going to be multiple options ultimately.
I'm just wondering if they would consider this committee, the nation's bail reform and those conversations, and making sure that that's a part of the package when they're.
I think so. I think, those from the courts specifically, and there's 4 members specific from the courts, from the city and the common pleas court that are in involvement in this. I have a feeling that's all coming into this discussion too. So I think many of you know the PMC group. They've been very effective and helpful to the county in the past, and I think they're going to help lead this discussion. We intend to be able to come back to this group on certain intervals. I don't think it's been decided as of yet how we should do that, just to come back and brief you, just to say this is where we think things are going right now and updates on the process. We don't want to just come to you at the very end and saying, boom, here you go. This is what you got to make a decision on. So.
Okay, so I just want to leave this, I guess this committee a little clear. So 10 months, it took 10 months to get to this point, and this point will determine what we're going to do.
So
in
it
light
took
of
us
this-
time.
in this
We can
pro-
get consensus.
That's it. Consensus, and that MOU is a great building block to
Okay,
get to that
so we're not
point.
there yet. This is.
No, but now we've got an understanding of how we're about to move forward with all of those significant players.
So how can you, if it took 10 months to get to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you have the MOU, how can you lead us to believe this will only take a year for this committee to?
Well, this is a planning phase, so we're going to look at all different options and opportunities that are out there. So that's what I'm saying, is it's going to take us a full year to go through a planning phase to come before you. And if we say we're going to need to build a brand new place, the hope is we come before you sometime towards the end of this year and saying, the recommendation, all costs associated, access to justice, things like that, we've taken this all into consideration, and that's what's ultimately coming before you. So
Will this group decide along the way if that's the recommendation, or even in the discussion of the recommendation, how it will get paid for? Would that be?
yeah, cost is, if you look at those guiding principles, cost is one of those items.
Cost is one
it's-
thing about deciding how it's going to get paid for.
Well, sure. That's probably, like I said, this probably be the largest capital expenditure by the county in its history.
Thank you.
I know that I can remember talking about how long this has been. I remember about 5 years ago when the former council president and I were given a presentation by your predecessor, and there were about a half a dozen different concepts and prices at that time. It's under the previous county executive, obviously. So it's been a long process, and it's quite unfortunate that we weren't able to make more progress this year. But we finally seem to have consensus on a process to have this discussion. So I'm pleased to see that. You want to give a presentation about the PMC?
Yeah, just how we went through the process of that selection, which I think is very important for everyone to understand. So it should be on the PowerPoint there. Sorry.
Perfect. So we released an RFQ in June of 2017 for these services, similar to how we solicit for any of our professional services. The RFQ was due early August of 2017, and we had a selection committee that was made up of several of the folks that were associated with the MOU. We tried to hit the executive's office, had staff on there, Public Works obviously leading the project, courts, the prosecutor, and the Cleveland Municipal Court. So these representatives reviewed all the proposals that came in. We received 4 from 4 different groups. We scored them based on a selection of categories related to project management, their project approach, their staffing, their history with projects like this. And they're all teams that we're evaluating. So while we're saying PMC, they do have several sub-consultants on their team that are experts in different areas of the project. We evaluated the 4, we reduced it to a short list of 3 that we interviewed. And all the same people that were on the selection committee were part of the interview team. And each of these groups came in with their team and answered some questions, the same questions that we asked of everybody related to the project. And from there, as a consensus, the group made a decision to move forward with project management consultants as our selected vendor.
Any questions? I'm sorry, did
No,
I cut you off?
that's good on the selection. If anyone has any more questions on the selection, this is just a brief slide of giving you the scope of work that the owner's rep is going to do. Their main goal is to facilitate the process. They also bring to the table different experts related to cost estimating, scheduling. They are going to work with our programmer. They're going to help us select the programmer and develop the scope that we need from the programmer that will feed into their decision-making tree. And essentially lead this group to get us to a point that we can then be done with the planning stage and make a recommendation as far as how we move forward with the project, not only on what we're building, but how we're going to build it. You've seen before we do traditional design, bid, build projects, which is our standard road projects, some of our facilities. And then we've also done lots of design build projects. That's how we built this building. That's how we built the Hilton. And there's several other methodologies that we'll look at that PMC will help us decide when we get to a point of what we want to build, how we're going to build it as well. And so that gets us through this planning phase of their project. So that's it on the PMC contract, so we'll be happy to take any questions.
Committee.
Yeah, if I could.
Then Councilman Miller, then Councilman Jones.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Just touching on the contractual status of PMC Limited right now. So where are we at with them? I mean, have they done any preliminary work, or are they in a holding pattern?
Yeah, they've been in a holding pattern for about a year. So, I mean, they have helped us back and forth. We've, any revisions of scope, clarification that we needed, but essentially the contract that we have before you today is the same contract with a date change that was before you a year ago. So, it's the same type of scope of work. They did help facilitate a little discussion related to the MOU, just clarifying their role and how the MOU would work with their process, but is the same thing that we presented a year ago is what you have on the table. So the contract had been read twice. It did go to Public Safety Committee, and this would be the 3rd reading at the council meeting tonight.
Okay, and so was the holdup the MOU? Was that the holdup?
Correct.
Okay. I know, Mr. Dever thinks that that's a great building block, that MOU, but I just, sometimes too many cooks spoil the broth, so you just have to be a little bit cautious. I know ultimately. Cooks? Did I say cooks? Chefs. Okay, so ultimately, everything will come through county council.
Correct.
Correct, and we hold the purse strings on all this, and I would like to see, as you indicated, regular updates, in vain of the ERP, unfortunately, but
Well, yes, I agree. Obviously, the council is going to, given the circumstances, it's a long discussion, but given the circumstances, that eventually, if there is consensus, it's still going to come to us. And so we will need regular reports along the way in order to be best prepared to participate. But we will have a member, of course, as you know, at those meetings, and probably some staff as well, I'm sure.
So we've already tentatively put out there a timeline to have the first meeting towards the end of this month. So we're reaching out in anticipation that this would be obviously approved today.
Give us the date as soon as possible. Councilman Miller, I think was next, and then Councilman Jones.
Mr. President, Mr. Dever, as it's been updated, what's the start and end date of the contract and the dollar amount?
The start date is set as tomorrow. It's when it would be executed. And the contract itself is listed for 24 months, just to cover us, because again, we know this could be difficult. However, the schedule is, we'd like to get most of this work done within 12 months. And the contract is for $800,000 and not to exceed.
And second question, that's a lot of money just for planning and organizing. Can you give me some understanding of what the activities would be that could add up to that amount of money?
Sure. So back to the scope of services slide that we had, they start with some general project requirements, setting up the requirements, the protocols, setting up roles and responsibilities, communicating with the project team, coordination. And then the main thing is kicking off the project and working with us on the experts that we need and bringing in the right sub-consultants related to helping us select the programmer, negotiating the contract with the programmer, and then selecting other specialty consultants, holding all these programming meetings. They're going to take all the data that they get from the programmer, and they have on their team Kitchell, who is a justice expert, to then feed this in. They also have a real estate expert. They have CBRE on their team to start looking at what it means. The programmer is going to feed to them, we need so many courtrooms of this size. We need this much public gathering space. Then the PMC team is going to take all that information and figure out what it means to put that in a building, how that works together. Do we split out the jails? Do we not? How do we cost all these different options? So they are going to take the programming information and then feed it through the system in order to get us alternatives moving forward. So they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting on taking in the data and then spitting out usable information for us to understand how much space we need, where it could be, how much it would cost, how long it's going to take us to build, and then doing comparison matrix to so that we all can understand alternative 1 means this, alternative 2 means this, and how we can sort of filter that down into something we can then decide on as a group.
So, Mr. President, Director, the two consultants that they're going to work with that you mentioned, is their cost included within the 800,000?
Yes.
It is, okay.
The only thing that is outside of that is the programmer cost, which will come to you with a separate contract. We'll do a similar process. We're hoping to release that on Friday with an RFQ, a selection process, and a new contract that will come to you. And that, as part of our selection committee of the PMC contract, it was made fairly clear from the committee that they wanted us to have control of the programmer. They didn't want that to be under the owner's rep because they really wanted to feel that it was an independent, we had control of the programmer to be sure that they were going to look at it holistically and not, somewhat be told how to look at it, whether it means sharing courtrooms or not sharing courtrooms. They wanted us to be able to guide the programmer.
Just by way of comparison, the cost that we recently approved for the disparity study was about 300,000, and as everybody knows, the disparity study is a very extensive process. It typically lasts a whole year and covers the full range of the county's procurement activities. So the 800,000 seems like a lot of money.
Do you have anything further, Councilman, on that? Are
Not
you
at this
suggesting
time.
that we don't approve this contract?
I'm not suggesting that. I mean, what we're doing here is long overdue.
All right.
And I just it just seems like a lot of money, and I'm asking about it. But I don't think we have much of a choice but to proceed.
All right.
And it is
Point-
not. It is
Point
not.
taken, and we're going to go to Mr. Jones, and I know Ms. Baker would like a question. I want to remind people, we're going to have an executive committee meeting. There's going to be a lot of discussion for a long time about this project. Hold on. We're going to have an executive committee meeting. We have 3 items in executive committee meeting. It's not meant to dampen the conversation. It's just to remind everybody.
Just a quick comment, it is not to exceed, so hopefully it can come in somewhat less than the limit that's proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Chairman. All right, who's next here? Jones.
Chairman. I just want to be able to visualize at the end of a year or 2 years what we're receiving from the contractor. Are we receiving a list of options? Will there be a recommendation of one, or pros and cons of the options? What will we expect to receive at the end of the contract?
At the end, we hope we can bring to you a suggested solution. So it would be one alternate that was decided on from this group that they've facilitated consensus on. So at the end of the day, we would have an idea of what we would be building, whether it's renovating, a mixture, where it could possibly go, stay in place, move elsewhere, not necessarily a site, but if it is off-site. And then a recommendation of how to build it, which method we should use to build the new site. So those are the two pieces that we should come to you at the end of this process. What we want to build and how we want to build it.
Remind me of the name of the contractors again.
Project Management Consultants is the lead. Kitchell is the justice consultant that they have on board, and CBRE is their real estate consultant.
Who are the people, the actual owners or individuals? I'm
So
trying to
Jeff
recognize
Applebaum
there
is
we go.
the
That's what I was
lead from
wondering. It's
PMC,
Jeff
right? So
Applebaum.
he was our owner's rep on the hotel project too.
Okay.
And he was your owner's rep on this building.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Baker.
Just two quick questions. I know we're tight on time. One is, would it be helpful to build in the review dates? I know how time flies and everyone gets involved, and next thing you know, 6 months has passed. Would it be helpful to actually say April 1st, July 1st, whatever? Just set some dates to put a little pressure on those that are going through this, these guiding principles, to make sure that you're hitting the mark and that we can also anticipate when you will be coming back?
Those first meetings that are going to take place with PMC and the executive stakeholders, that's where you're going to develop the schedule and timeline, and everybody's going to agree on. And if you had a chance to look through the MOU, it makes reference to supermajority approvals on things to try and move this thing along. You know, somebody is always against. It's just the nature of.
Right.
So that is what's going to develop here within the first, I think, month to 6 weeks, is the clear protocol of how they're going to try and move forward and putting together a schedule to keep everyone accountable to. And we're identifying alternates for each of those executive committee members, and trying to make this as easy as possible for people to vote on things, to move things along. And we've identified those clear items, determinations that we think we're going to need consensus from the group on, and those are included in there.
So your timeline will including us in getting updates. That'll be in your timeline.
We will put that in there, and you'll get tired of seeing Mr. Applebaum, I feel.
The second the quick question is there any penalty for performance by the consultant if they don't follow through in a year and bring us what it is that we anticipate?
Well,
I mean, payment, I guess, it not necessarily in the contract as far as if they don't bring us what we need. I mean, they have a scope they have to deliver, and that's tied to their payment. So, I mean, we feel comfortable that they know what they need to deliver in order to get us there. Now, I mean, the wild card is they have to corral this committee. So, you know, they will do their best and they will try to move us along, and they have a strong history of facilitating projects, big projects like this, and coming to consensus. So that was one of their strong points when we selected them, is we really felt there was two teams that were very close, but we felt like their ability to corral the group was going to be stronger.
Okay, thank you.
Please do.
I will. Is the selection committee that selected them, are they going to be having a continuing responsibility going forward in this project?
PMC, that is?
No, the selection committee that picked PNC.
Some of them are on the stakeholder committee.
That's my concern, is that when the same group that picked them is now have a vested interest in what they're going to be saying.
Well,
So I just-
actually,
I think just
they may be alternates, a few of them,
Right.
but it's typically the elected officials from each of those groups, or those that are in charge of specific groups. So,
You're talking about the MOU, the folks who signed the MOU?
right.
They're going to be actually making decisions on the building?
The intent is to have them in this process going forward. These are the key stakeholders that have the bully pulpit to grab the microphone and speak about the process, I mean, we're going to engage those people
We saw how well that worked with the Juvenile Justice Center.
a different time. And
I
think we
hope
can
so,
take
and I hope a different result.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think everyone looks back at that and what happened with that process.
Dan.
Okay. Billy?
Just to comment, there are 12 stakeholders and 12 vested parties and 12 different thought processes and feelings and opinions. My feeling, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the MOU is just to bring all 12 together and say, this is how we're going to hold hands and move forward together. And that's how I perceive the MOU. This is what we've agreed to. We've got Jeff Applebaum and all who are going to deliver for the 12 what we've all collectively, and I see our council president's name is here among the 12. So we have weighed in. This is who we have collectively come together to select and move forward together. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's very correct. That's great.
Thank you.
So there is two items in relation to this. There's obviously an amendment to the resolution because of the timeline, since it changed. And then there's an item in regards to the fiscal agenda about the 800,000 that wasn't carried forward from 18 that we're asking for an amendment.
We have that on our calendar for this evening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to be going into executive session. And all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio open meeting laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council's committee of the whole will go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining matters and pending or imminent litigation. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not needed for the executive committee session to remain in the council chamber. Council members will convene in the adjacent committee room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session is ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining matters and pending or imminent litigation? Been moved and second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Moving to executive session, Ms. Stevens? Aye. Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron? Yes. Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
And Council President Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, the ayes have it. We'll adjourn into the executive meeting for executive session. Thank you. Miscellaneous business, hearing none. The executive committee is adjourned until 5 o'clock and the regular meeting. Thank you all.